So welcome to the SecureDynamics panelcast. With me, I have four guests. And the first one in order, Helen Patton, who is the advisory CISO and author and teacher. We have Heather Monthie, who's a cybersecurity architect, podcaster, and author. We have Brian Kelly, who is the director of cybersecurity program at EduCause and a former CISO. And finally, we have Kevin Metcalf, who has a day job as a deputy prosecuting attorney. But his claim to fame, at least in my mind, is the CEO of the National Child Protection Task Force. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So let's start with something that we're all faced with, right? Which is really the need for data. And better data means obviously better insight, better learning, better predictions, and so forth. But the question I have is, where does the data come from in the first place, right? It's from all of us and all the things that we do and don't do. And then there are data brokers who actually take this information and make hay with it. But the net of it is, without the data, we really aren't able to make decisions that actually help us protect ourselves. On the other hand, data intrusion is intrusion privacy, right? So like, what is the fine balance between intrusion in order for protection? So why don't we start with, in order that I introduced you. So Helen, we'll go with you.
It's a tricky problem. I think where I would recommend we start is thinking about it through the lens of the consumer or the end user or the employee, whatever the person whose data it is that you're dealing with, and asking whether or not you're being transparent with the way you handle that data. So are we giving people the autonomy to make decisions? So if we look at, for example, the challenges that are going on right now between the Apple Store and vendors who are wanting to put apps on the Apple Store, and this question of, well, Apple's not stopping you from using their store, but they are saying if you're going to be on our store, in our app store, then you have to tell people what kind of data collections you're doing, and they have to agree. And there are a number of vendors who are on that store who are going, oh my, this probably means we're going to either lose half of our audience, or we're going to have to significantly change our business processes on the back end. And I don't think that's necessarily an unhealthy way to think about it. I think the challenge comes into play is that how we have evolved to handle data is terribly complicated, and being able to explain to someone who's not a technologist what you're doing with the data and why, particularly in the security space, is actually a bit of a problem. You've got to teach them a whole new language before they can even begin to understand, let alone consent. So I think transparency is the ultimate sort of value we need to be working towards, but I think we've got a journey to be able to do that well.
Great points. Heather, your thoughts?
Yes, I definitely agree. I think transparency is the key word there, is, making sure that your end users know what you're doing with their data. And I think that, I'm thinking about that this morning. I was just on the phone with my mom and trying to explain to her the differences between, she's got Google Cloud and Samsung Cloud and all these different clouds, and she's trying to understand this, right? So if people don't understand what they're consenting to, are they really truly giving consent? So I think it's, and I've spoken about this a lot in the past, where it's up to us as technology professionals, cybersecurity professionals, that when we're reaching out to the end user in whatever way it may be, and in this case, it's we're collecting your information, here's what we're going to do with it. You need to present it in a way that they understand it, they fully understand what you're doing with it, and what are the the consequences. What are the things that can happen as a result of that? So I think just being transparent and educating your users.
Again, that puts me up next. So I would add, and it's always good going. It's like you're getting all these thoughts from everyone else as you're going through. So I would take transparency a little bit farther to trust, right? So one of the things we're seeing from the higher ed community is around how we're collecting and using student information. And are we being transparent about it? But do the students trust that we're using that in an ethical way that is in their best interest? And so that sort of, is a little bit of nuance to where we see this intersection of, we used to always say data privacy, right? And it was always around the privacy of the data that was collected And did that meet a regulatory standard? And now there's sort of this ethical standard around student analytics and student success that isn't necessarily regulated data, right? It's that sort of, when we think about privacy in the context of freedom from being observed, and what's being observed is that data trail, right? So it does all go back to data, but a lot of what we're collecting, to your point around whether we're doing that intentionally or accidentally or buying the data, what we're collecting is maybe student behavior, and that feels like you're being observed and maybe surveillance, and that's where it's starting to get a little bit on the creepy side. So I think, starting with trust in that, whether that's in the app store or in your terms and conditions, and trying to put it in a way that is easily understandable, that's the challenge.
Kevin.
Well, this is a hell of a group you've got me in here. I am the least techy person of all, but yeah, I got to say the transparency part, and do the consumers actually understand what they're giving away? That's a big thing. In law enforcement, for example, when Miranda came about, we got to read them their rights and tell them they have the right to all this stuff. Law enforcement thought, oh, that's going to be the end of any good information coming in. Turns out it wasn't. Even the informed criminals are still talking. They're still doing things. And I know there's a big push out. How many people, every time I talk to parents or any of these community groups, how many of you read the terms of service? How many of you read the privacy policy? How many of you can tell me what data this app is collecting on you? It's not only that, it's the things that we don't know yet. It's the anonymized data. Should I do this? Anonymized data that, that's coming in. What can we do with that? Well, we know that there can be a lot more stuff. So a lot more done with that than even, and I have yet to see any group come out and say, we're going to take your data, we're going to anonymize it so it won't identify you, but here's the real deal. So yeah, I think that the transparency is a big thing, but then again, I'm not sure everybody wants that free app. Everybody wants to give all their stuff away. It's kind of like, law enforcement, they dig through people's trash, and it's just been a treasure trove of data over the years. But you throw that stuff away, do you have any right to it anymore? You gave it away, but you didn't expect law enforcement to make use of it. And I think we're seeing that here. We're giving away our location data. We're giving away our stuff, and that's fine because I want that free app until I have this emotional overload and I commit this horrible crime. And now they can go back and dig through that and find me. So I want it back, and I want to limit that. So there are a lot of issues on this, but yeah, I think transparency, I think all we can do is make the public more aware of what's going on. And I don't have an answer for how to do that, because I seriously doubt anybody's going to pay any attention until it affects them personally.